Now, I went to bed last night disappointed that Zeldin's insurgency wasn't successful, but I'm reminded that more than 1 million votes were not yet counted last night. Is this a third world country where they just have 1 million votes sitting around? The state of Georgia has been painful for any Republican. It was the site of a double loss in 2020. 2 seats went Democrat that day. One of them was up again last night. The Republicans ran Herschel Walker, a former football star. He did not win, but neither did the Democrat, Raphael Warnock, who both of them were just under the 50% mark. In Arizona law, if you don't win 50%, they have a runoff again. So there will be another election. I am not optimistic. Interestingly, in a statewide vote, the one where Herschel Walker did not hit 50%, the Republican governor did. He actually won fairly handily. How did the local governor win as a Republican, but Herschel Walker did more poorly than him? But back to what I said earlier, what's up with not knowing the results in hours? I take it that that Georgia law says there has to be a runoff. That's not a problem with counting. But how is it that you have 1 million uncounted votes in New York? How is it that Arizona says they're going to need days or even weeks to count? I saw this video go up yesterday in the middle of the day, and I thought, they're getting started already. Take a look at this.
Hello, Maricopa County. I'm Bill Gates, the chairman of the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors.
And I'm Stephen Richard, the Maricopa County Recorder.
And we're here to give you an update on how things are going so far with the election. We've already had almost 44,000 people show up this morning, check in, and be available to vote. And things are going great out there, but there's one thing that we wanted to address to make people aware of today, and that has to do with our tabulators. We've got about 20% of the locations out there where there's an issue with the tabulator, where some of the ballots that after people have voted them, they try and run them through the tabulator and they're not going through. But the good thing is we do, first of all, we're trying to fix this problem as quickly as possible. And we also have a redundancy in place. If you can't put the ballot in the tabulator, then you can simply place it here in where you see the number 3. And this is a secure box where those ballots will be kept for later this evening, where we'll bring them in here to Central Count to tabulate them.
So this would function much like early voting functions, in that we would get your ballot back. Once we've signature verified it, we would send it to our central tabulators. Ballots that are in here will already be, in effect, signature verified, so we won't need to confirm identity, but we will central tabulate them. This is actually what the majority of Arizona counties do on election day all the time.
And just one thing to keep in mind, we have 223 vote centers across the county. So if there are lines at the location you're at or issues with the tabulator, if you would prefer to go to another location, you can do that. Doesn't matter where you go, as long as you're a registered voter here in Maricopa County. Thanks so much. And everybody, if you haven't yet, get out and vote.
What a joke. What a clown show. How about just using paper and pencil? You know, election integrity are 2 words you're not allowed to say. In fact, if you say them in the wrong way on YouTube or other social media, you'll get a strike. You'll be deplatformed. It's very strange. You're not allowed to say that U.S. elections are not reliable. At least you're not allowed to say that about the 2020 election. Democrats say that all the time about elections that Republicans win. I remember it first when George W. Bush beat Al Gore and they looked at the hanging chads, and that case went to the Supreme Court. For years, Democrats said that George W. Bush was not the legitimate president. They called him a usurper. That's all fine to say on social media, but you can't say that about Democrat shenanigans. I want to show you a quick clip from our live stream last night. I can't even believe this. No ID, just saying your name, saying your phone number or your address, and you vote. Take a look.
I don't think Canadians even realize when I went to vote today, all I was asked is, what is your last name? And then they're like, this is your first name. I'm like, yes. And they're like, this is your address. I'm like, yes. And then they just printed out a little receipt, had me sign it. And then I got my ballot and I voted and I put it in the scanner and I left. But who's to say it? If you know someone's first and last name and you know their address, what could stop you from voting for them? Because she didn't have a computer. It was like just like a piece of paper with all the people in my area because I'm a smaller precinct. There was no voter ID check. There's none of that going on like it does in Canada. And I'm just shocked every time I vote here, being like, this is so weird.
Yeah, that really is weird. That's terrifying. I mean, you went in there in good faith and no shenanigans, but I could only imagine. So they literally didn't ask you for any card or any ID of any sort?
You don't need it. You just need to be registered to vote. And if you're registered to vote, you just go where you're supposed to go. Like, cause like you have them and for your specific area, you go there, you're on a list. They check you off that you've done it. You sign a little thing saying like, yep, this is me. And then you go and get your ballot.
Can you believe that? I can't, there's just, you know, you need more ID to buy a lottery ticket than to vote. Now, Donald Trump was not on the ballot, of course, but he was certainly lurking in the background, and he stumped for Republican candidates around the country. Certainly, he was more welcome at Republican events than Joe Biden was at Democrat events. Now, today, Donald Trump was boasting, saying that the vast majority of candidates for whom he endorsed or campaigned won. And I think that is mathematically accurate. It's the exact same message that the New York Times has when they say 200 election deniers won. That's a term of art at the New York Times. They call anyone who doubts the results of the 2020 election, they call them election deniers, sort of like a Holocaust denier. That's their phrase. I think there's a symbiosis between Donald Trump and the liberal media like the New York Times. They love to fight each other. And so if Donald Trump says something to inspire his base, the New York Times says it to inflame their base in reaction. It's quite something. But it is a fact that key people that Donald Trump endorsed underperformed. Dr. Oz, the Republican candidate in Pennsylvania, how could he not beat a stroke victim? And the governor candidate of that state, how could he not win? Blake Masters and, of course, Herschel Walker, we mentioned before. I think one of the reasons is that Donald Trump keeps talking about 2020 and how he was wronged. And perhaps he was. I'm sympathetic to that. And that New York Times poll we went through the other week showed that probably about a third of Americans are sympathetic to that too. But relitigating the details, the ins and outs of that debate, that's inside baseball in 2022 in a country that is on the verge of a recession, has record inflation, and has real crises that affect real people. It was an interesting night. It was certainly not the success I hoped it would be for Republicans. And it makes me think, what will the big show in 2024 be like in the presidential season? On the one hand, you could have Ron DeSantis, a successful governor who can turn a purple state, as they call those sort of half and half states, into a red state with supermajorities in the legislature. They can pass anything they want now. There are no statewide offices in Florida held by Democrats. Democrats are almost an extinct species in Florida. DeSantis has a strong media game. He's not a pushover. He's young, especially by comparison to Trump. He's very policy-oriented. He reminds me in some ways of Stephen Harper. He's not very cool and not very funny, but he's solid. Ron DeSantis was a winner last night, but he's not the most likely candidate for the Republicans. That's Trump himself, a man of controversy and division. Now, I love Trump. I was one of the few Canadians who saw in him the ability to beat the Democrats in 2015. I think we were really the only media outlet in Canada that was cheering for him. And that fit the times in 2015 and 2016. It was the right approach to beat Hillary Clinton, which he did, and I don't think any other Republican candidate would have. I loved many of the things he did as president, not all of the things, but many of them. And I think Republicans now are looking their wounds or counting their wins and thinking, which is the right candidate for 2024? Now, of course, it's possible that another possibility presents itself, another candidate, but I think DeSantis and Trump are the two serious contenders. What you just saw was an excerpt from my nightly show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every weekday, I do a monologue. Usually it's about half an hour. Then I interview an interesting guest, and then we read my hate mail or my fan mail, whichever is more fun. It's only available behind a paywall, though. That's how we pay our bills here at Rebel News. We don't take a dime from Justin Trudeau. But the good news is it's only $8 a month, about half the price of Netflix. And in addition to my nightly show, you also get weekly shows from 4 other friends here at Rebel News. So you're getting 36 shows a month just for $8. I think it's worth it. And even if you're not quite sure, do it anyways, because we rely on viewers like you to keep us free and independent. I promise you I'll never take a dime from Trudeau. Just go to rebelnewsplus.com and click subscribe. Thanks.